Welcome to the On the Road with Al and Ivy podcast, with your host, Al Handa, and featuring the music of Handa McGraw International and the solo work of Mark McGraw. Classic literature's greatest hits: Hermann Hesse and Marcel Proust, AI technology and art. Hermann Hesse's book, Steppenwolf, doesn't have chapters, so it's difficult to reference the location of many of the passages in dialogue which have relevance to today's debate about AI and art. The main character, Harry, has a series of conversations with others who are both real and imagined. Among the most significant are the exchanges between Harry and the ghost of Mozart. The main point in their discussion is the conflict between technology and the purity of art created by humans. In this case, it's what a radio broadcast does to the pure concepts of music. Mozart's point is, quote, "When you listen to the radio, you are a witness of the everlasting war between idea and appearance, between time and eternity, between the human and the divine," unquote. He contends that the message comes through even if the airwaves distort the music. This concept isn't an abstract point. Today, for example, people argue about the merits of a compressed MP3 file versus lossless audio versus digital versus vinyl. Almost every new technology changes art if the audience likes it. As far as the potential for AI-generated work, we don't really know yet. Historically, it doesn't matter much what creators think. If AI art sells, then there'll be artists and companies who will break ranks and go all in on it. Also, it's good to recall what happened to manufacturing jobs when robotics were introduced. It's only a matter of time before AI bots make everything from writing to interior design accessible to the average person. It won't replace genius, but most of the commercial market only requires competence. The issues of royalties and plagiarism will probably be resolved, like with music sampling or other derivative disciplines, through lawsuits and public awareness campaigns. I'm not being cynical here. The legal system isn't a beauty contest, but it does work more or less. There'll be some lawsuits, there'll be a lot of controversy, but things will sort out in the commercial marketplace. Hesse doesn't resolve the question of whether Mozart or Harry is right about tech and art. Or more precisely, it leaves the resolution of the debate open to time. That doesn't mean artists should wait and see, but the change is here, and AI's ultimate potential may not be clear for years. However, AI-generated art won't reach its potential without human artists. Continuing on, Marcel Proust's overture from Swann's Way and how to write a great opening chapter. The thing about Marcel Proust's Swann's Way is he wrote an opening chapter that only a human could write. If you want an example of a writer that AI would find nearly impossible to duplicate, it would be Marcel Proust. The first chapter feels like he drew random thoughts or subjects out of a hat and then wrote a chapter that connected those in an interesting stream of consciousness that, as rambling as it might seem, gives the reader a clear sense of his personality. The opening overture walks a thin line between flightiness and nailing the feat of putting on paper the moment-to-moment images and thoughts of a human mind. Most psychological novels are highly structured, with well-constructed observations that are insightful, but not generally showing how the mind works as one's senses move from one stimulus to the next. Literature can be the product of input and reactions laid out and organized with reflection, observation, and context added later after the first written draft. It doesn't mean Proust didn't add reflective passages or philosophical observations to his work. It's just that he didn't write the chapter as a structured piece like Joyce's Ulysses, which was a very different type of work even if both were psychological. A man who sees a woman walk by isn't necessarily going to contemplate the complexities of the species' survival. He might add a meditative passage later in a work in progress that adds detail to that brief glimpse, but that's not how our minds work in real time. My first reaction to this chapter was amazement at his imagination until I realized it was an actual train of thought and not a virtuoso assembling of imagery. We're used to books that describe elaborate internal dialogues, which of course can happen in spurts in everyday life, but rarely one where the observations and thoughts are genuinely unfiltered. Proust may think differently, but his mind works pretty much like anyone else's. His best quality besides genius is honesty. By that, I don't mean it's full of juicy confessions, but that he's willing to be quite ordinary, as Orwell once said. Following a path includes the trivial. As a result, the passages seem vivid and human, which is also a credit to the translator, C.K. Scott Moncrief. It's very much a chapter written by a human being. Let's continue with a less than serious meditation on coming-of-age rites. Coming-of-age rites for young men and women have pretty much remained the same throughout history. Men endure epic tests of strength and will, while women are trained in the sacred roles of motherhood, parenting, and how to avoid getting a case of the ass from dealing with men. Some cynics have suggested that a woman's parenting training applies to men and children, while others insist that following a man's orders requires no special skill. While accurate attribution for such insights isn't possible due to the degraded condition of the ancient source material concerning motherhood that was discovered in a Chicago 5th Street Salvation Army bookstore section in 1989, the debate does appear to be divided along male and female lines. Further investigation on the subject on web search engines yielded opinions too incendiary to reprint here, and as all were created under false names, the data is only suitable for internet-grade research. However, there is an admittedly tenuous historical link from 1856 to some Sumerian cuneiform tablets that were actually about astronomy, claiming that men are from Saturn and women are from Venus. Although maturity is a desirable quality in men, the historical record isn't clear as to when it became so, though, and women's opinions on the subject weren't documented until maybe last year. It's always been treated as an optional quality, since women have to do the thinking anyway and be the adult in situations that doesn't involve fisticuffs, watching football games, and farting exhibitions. I should note that I'm oversimplifying for the sake of brevity, but the accuracy of my facts here should fall within acceptable internet standards of truth. I would put it at about 5% accuracy. Getting back to male rites of passage, what constitutes coming of age depends on what society believes are the first steps to adulthood. In addition, how society defines maturity depends on the sex of the person, regional customs, and how long one can get away with extending the adolescent stage, which generally depends on income level. I've given the subject of this mystical transition a great deal of thought, and several avenues of inquiry were considered. Hollywood was ruled out because there are already 1 million films about young men trying to trick women into having sex, and it's not clear if they actually attain maturity after doing so. Rock songs were never seriously considered, leaving books as the fount of transitional wisdom. The thing is, the modern age is complex, even if human emotions and frailties haven't changed very much. A rite of passage can now be more of a simple transition to adulthood, which in ancient times came as soon as possible, as parents needed extra hands in the fields, and the king needed cheap labor for tasks below the dignity of the royal person. I tend to define such rites as a life experience that profoundly affects a person's development or direction. It can mean the end of innocence, a realization about the true nature of something, but most of all, a moment of time when one finds their true self. It doesn't necessarily mean you live happily ever after. Joan of Arc chose a path that led to persecution and a painful death. Many explorers faced deprivation and death in remote places, and a great many artists achieved everything but material success. A simple and possibly inadequate way to put it all was that all of them found what they had to do. You've been listening to On the Road with Alan Ivy. The music of Honda McGraw International and Mark McGraw can be heard on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, and dozens of other streaming sites. You can read my written works, On the Road Alan Ivy and Delta Snake Review on X and Blogspot, Kindle Vella, and Kindle Unlimited. Thank you for listening.